Morning. My name is Barbara Fuller, and as chair of the board, I welcome you to this September 19th, 2023 working session of the Washtenaw County Board of Road Commissioners. Our office coordinator, Aaron Smith, will describe how our meetings operate, how to access the agenda packet, and how to participate remotely. Aaron.
Thanks, Chair Fuller. There are multiple ways to make public comment during today's working session, whether you're joining us in person or virtually. If you're here in person and would like to make public comment, please fill out the sign-in sheet now. If you're joining us virtually, we'll ask you to raise your hand at the appropriate time in the agenda. If you're joining us virtually and are experiencing technical issues with audio or video during the meeting, submit a comment in the chat feature and our communications manager will help you troubleshoot. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted to wcroads.org in the next few days. There are printed copies of today's meeting agenda on the table near the front door, and it is also posted on our website. And now I'll turn it over to Chair Fuller.
Thank you, Aaron. I now call this meeting to order and ask Aaron to call the roll.
Chair Barb Fuller.
Present.
Vice Chair Rod Green. Present. Commissioner Gloria Yamas is absent today. Commissioner Joanne McCullum.
Present.
Commissioner Jeff Smurs.
Present.
And the following directors are in attendance: Managing Director Cheryl Siddle, Director of Engineering Matt McDonald, Director of Operations Adam Lape, and Director of Finance and IT Dan Ackerman.
Thank you, Aaron. At this point in our working session, it's public participation time. This is the time set aside on the agenda to receive comments from the public. This is not intended to be a period for dialogue. Each person will be allotted 3 minutes to address the board. Aaron will explain how people may be recognized to offer comments. Aaron?
Since this is a hybrid meeting with both in-person and virtual attendees, we will take turns between those attending in person and virtually. For virtual attendees, we have provided some instructions on the screen on how to participate and make public comment. If you're attending this meeting virtually and would like to make public comment, please raise your hand now. If you dialed into the meeting from your phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. Our communications manager will unmute virtual participants with raised hands one at a time and will announce your username or last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Please share your name and address before beginning your comments. And then at this time, we don't have anyone virtual or in person that would like to make a comment.
All right, thank you. We will move right along. The first item in our working session is an IT update. I will turn this over to Cheryl if you would move us along.
I'd be happy to do that. Actually, Dan Ackerman, our Director of IT and Finance, is asked to kick off before we hand it over to Chris Quinter.
Well, you go right after it, Dan.
You're well trained.
There we go. Okay, there we go. Thanks. Good morning, Dan Ackerman, Director of Finance and IT. And just want to say a couple of things before I very quickly turn it over to Chris Quinter.
Okay.
This is a great presentation he's put together. He's going to be talking about just kind of an overview of the Road Commission's IT. What do we have? He's also going to talk about projects that were completed throughout the year, which certainly I've shared that with the board, you know, in my reports to you. There are a few projects that he's finishing up for this year, and he'll speak about that, as well as, and I've talked to the board about this before, but we always have to look forward. IT things, the technology seems to change daily, so we want to make sure that we're keeping up with things, and you know, we always need to make improvements and things like that. So he'll be talking about going forward, some of the things that we'll be working on. But I did want to just say, as far as Chris and his approach to the Road Commission IT, you know, he does a great job managing all of the projects that he's involved with. He's always proactive, and he's a great communicator. So staff is like, what the heck's going on? He does a great job communicating with staff. And you know, usually the projects he's involved with are finished timely. Actually, a lot of the time they're finished early and lower than budget. If you remember, the cell phone project was, you know, crazy under budget. And so, you know, he's definitely a real asset to the agency. And also Josh is here. Josh, does everybody know Josh? I'm assuming so. great to see Josh here, and Josh has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting with our help desk. And he's very patient, which what would you say, a third or a half of the help desk tickets might be user error or? Yeah, so, but Josh is extremely patient with everybody and has a quick turnaround. As you'll see, Chris will have some of the numbers as far as our closure rates and so on, just does a great job. You know, we made it a point early on that every user of road commission technology is important, regardless if you're at the main yard or the satellite yards. And I think Josh, you know, treats everybody equally, which is awesome and certainly something that we want. And I know I've received, probably Chris as well, a lot of positive comments about Josh and his support of the organization. So we appreciate all that he does. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chris for the presentation.
And while Chris is coming up, I would just echo all that you said about both Chris and Josh. I've always been amazed at how quickly they answer my Maydays. And Josh is always like, would you like me to just come in? And I'm like, yes, I would. So thank you. And thanks, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris Quinter, IT manager. So thank you for that, Commissioner. And thank you, Dan, for the introduction. As I go through here, I have a lot of information. Some of it will be things you've seen before. I know we have at least one new commissioner that has not seen this presentation so far. So please interrupt me if you have questions. Happy to answer that. Happy to have a conversation as we go through this. So things I'll cover, as Dan mentioned, I'd like to go through our kind of our overview of our department, our infrastructure, some of our policies, things of that nature. And then we can get into some of the different projects we completed this year, and then projects we're currently working on that will go into next year, and then things we're looking at into the future. Dan alluded to this a little bit already. Our team, we're a team of 3 here on site. So we have Dan, that is our director, myself, our IT manager, and then Josh Summerhill, our systems analyst. What you may not see or realize is we also work with a managed service provider called Applied Innovation. They have offices in Grand Rapids and Livonia. They are our kind of level 3 network engineer support level. They're kind of my backup, if you will. They're a team of 3 to 4 given the day and how many people they have on staff at the time. Multiple engineers that can help us with any major issues. They are also kind of my advisory staff, if you will, to present new technology or new strategies or things that are coming down the line that we may want to look at, offer advice for us. So I want to get into our infrastructure first. This will be a little repetitive from last year, but still very important. Not many changes from last year here, but I at least wanted to bring it up. So upstairs, there's 2 rooms that we manage. There's our server room and stock room, and then across the hall is our switch room and kind of the brain of the whole network. So this is this is a picture from the rack that we're looking at across the hall from our office. This is our switch room. So the internet that comes in from the street from Comcast is a dedicated fiber line. We put that in 2019. So that has been much more stable than the coax connection that we had previously. Since 2019, we've really only had one major outage where that internet has gone down. It was actually shortly after, I believe, a line got cut on a construction site. But severe weather, things like that, our internet connection has been very stable since we put that in. That dedicated fiber line services the internet to this building, as well as our traffic and safety network, which is the rack right beside that. As we move down the rack here, the 2 white appliances there, that's our firewall. So the top white appliance there is the primary firewall. That's really the brain and the backbone of the network, as well as a bodyguard, if you will, or our security from the outside world. So that's what's filtering our internet connection. And then the second box underneath there is a redundant one. So if there were to be a hardware failure in that piece of equipment, there's a connection there that it would default over to the secondary one, and it would keep our network up. Essentially, if both those boxes were to go down, there would be no internet in this building or connection to the other outside yards. So that's why we have a duplicate there in case of a failure. Moving down again, so the black box there, that is another fiber line. That is the fiber line that's running out to our shop at this yard. So, yeah, question?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Joanne, go ahead.
So in thinking about that with the power failure. What was I gonna say? You know, when we've had so many outages and things like that. So if I know that we've had the power running for temporary time, that doesn't affect this.
It does. So the way that our setup is, and I'll get into this a little bit in the next slide, but all of our racks have a battery backup on the bottom of them to keep those appliances running. We also have, through our facilities team, a generator that's out in the parking lot. So when this building loses power, those racks will switch to those battery backups for 5 to 6 seconds until that generator kicks on and reestablishes that power to them.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, so the next bullet point here, the black box, that's another fiber line. That's running from our switch rack upstairs out to our shop way in the back of this yard. So that distance is over 400 feet. We had it on an Ethernet line for a while, and the Cat 6 cable that we had is only really rated for about 300 to 350 feet. They were seeing significant lag and internet disruptions in their work out there. So we ran a fiber line. And if you walk into the garage, I'd be happy to show you too, but if you walk in the garage, you can see it. There's a yellow line that runs through the rafters. And then there's another smaller switch out there that then distributes that internet to all the workstations that are out there, and the different cameras and the different tools that are out in that location. And then the last thing I'll mention here. So again, this is where the internet comes into our building and establishes that connection. The other outside yards, so Manchester, Chelsea, Southeast Center, and Northeast Service Center, they all have their own internet connections, but then they access our network through a VPN or a virtual private network. So their firewalls at each of those yards as well, they have a smaller unit connects to the firewall here, and then they are able to access the servers and the resources at this yard.
So Chris, I have a question.
Sure.
So the satellite yards, are those fed with high-speed fiber, or what's
Great
their
question. No, but
connection to it?
and that we'll talk about that in my ongoing
Okay.
projects. Yep, great question.
Okay.
So the answer at the moment is no, but that is a project we're working on. So we'll talk more about that in a bit.
Okay,
So that was the switch room. So if you move across the hall, so this is the server room or our stock room. This is the one that is off of Josh's office on the second floor. So this is where I spoke about the firewall kind of being the brain of the network. This is our server system. It's really the brain of all of the different applications and resources that we have. So to the right here, you'll see what we refer to as our hyper-converged infrastructure. So what that means is there are 4 servers, 4 physical servers there in the rack that run multiple virtual servers. So the physical servers have the storage, the memory, all the equipment in there to host what we have now is 7 virtual servers. So we can, at any time, we can, instead of buying, when we have a new application or something that needs its own dedicated server, instead of needing to buy a server, we can essentially just install one on this server equipment. So it's just a matter of software that we can just configure, and then we have a new virtual server that we're able to use as if it were a physical one. Those virtual servers are then able to pull the storage or the memory or the resources from the physical servers, and we're able to add more later or subtract if we need to without physically installing more equipment. The other thing that's nice too is those virtual servers are able to bounce around on those physical servers. If one of those physical servers were to go down, that virtual server would go to either the second or the third or whichever has the most space available at the time. And it really helps when you're talking about failover or an equipment failure. It's able to switch quickly, and then you don't experience downtime. And then we have the time to go in and fix what may be wrong with one of those physical servers. That's a very confusing concept, and I'd be happy to show it to you if you would like. Any questions on that?
so when we send in, I'm gonna go real basic here, Chris.
Sure.
When we send emails back and forth, is this where it goes through? Or when I have
No.
to access an app, is it
So-
sitting there, or?
It is not. So our emails are hosted through Office 365. So your emails are going through Microsoft servers.
Where is that server?
Ooh, that's a great question. I do not know the answer to that. I'm not sure where they host their servers for 365.
Okay, but it's not here.
It's not here.
Yeah,
Correct.
okay.
So these
Okay.
servers are what are hosting our core applications, like our Precision, which is our financial software. RoadSoft is a big one that we use, Merle, things like that.
So any of these Microsoft apps are come
Correct.
to us
Those,
from.
yeah,
Bill
those are
Gates and stuff.
hosted in the Microsoft cloud.
Okay. All right,
Yeah, sure.
certainly. Commissioner McCollum.
Chris, so on the right side, okay, wait a minute. As I'm looking at this, my right side is over here. So that's the 4 physical servers?
So the 4 physical servers are right here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Clever.
So they're horizontal. So 1, 2,
This is great.
3, and 4.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
So those are all equal. Okay. So they each have about just under 200 gigs of storage,
Mhm.
and they have, I think it's over 100 gigs of RAM as well. So when we allocate storage or RAM or the memory to the virtual servers that they need, it pulls from that. When one of those, if one of those physical ones were to go down, if there were to be a hardware problem, those virtual servers would move to one of the other 3 and remain up. The difference there is between this setup and if we were to have a physical server for each of those 7 virtuals instead. In the past, that's what we've had. So you would have for each of those 7 virtuals, you would have 1 physical server. And if there was an equipment failure, you're kind of dead in the water until you can get a replacement. So the way this works is if there is an equipment failure, it bounces to one of those other 3. The chances of all 4 of those going down at the same time are very slim. I'll never say impossible in the IT field, but the chances are very slim. And in the event of that, I will go into a little bit more on if there is a failure of some kind, what precautions do we have set up?
Thank you.
Commissioner Green?
In the event of a fire
Yes,
and the physical servers are somehow destroyed,
sure.
what's our option?
Can I come back to you on that? I have.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope,
Okay.
that's fine. That's a great question.
Okay,
If I can, I will come back to you on that.
okay,
I have a whole thing
sure.
about how that's managed. So
Thank you.
any other questions on the servers there? Okay. So getting to your point already, Commissioner Green, the next appliance there is our backup system. So after this slide, I have a whole, we'll get into more details on the backup. I just want to show you where that is. So this next appliance here with all the green lights on the left side, that is where all the backups are going to every day. And then at the bottom, Joanne, or Commissioner McCollum, to your point, those are our battery backups at the bottom of that. There.
Nice job anticipating
Yeah.
what we're.
No,
Thank you.
show us.
As the gears. are-
We've done this a few times. So Commissioner Green, this will be to your point. So what do we do in case of a disaster, a fire, a malicious ransomware attack, something like that? How are we set up backup wise and for disaster recovery? So first, before we get into the disaster recovery, how are our backups done? So the appliance that I showed you on the previous slide, that's where our backups are going, into that physical device. So during the workday, we are running from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. We are running a backup every single hour. So what that means is it's going to capture all of the data and all of the settings and configurations from all the servers as they are in that moment every hour. It's not grabbing everything in its entirety. It's only grabbing what has changed since the previous hour. So it's not bogging down the bandwidth or limiting our resources or anything like that by moving the whole image. If we were to take that whole backup, it would take a good 5 days to grab everything as it is today. So those backups each hour only grab anything that's changed. So if I change a setting right now at the 10 o'clock hour, it'll grab that setting change and it'll be backed up. Same with our documents. If we have staff that are here, they make changes to some documents that are on the servers at that on the hour mark, it'll take that back up and it is now secured. As I mentioned, if we were to back up that entire server system, it would take a good couple days to do that. Typically, we call it an image. So if you were to imagine kind of a snapshot or a picture, that's kind of how we refer to each of these backups on a server. So we call those an image. So an image is the current state of all the settings and all of the documents. So when we grab one of those images, each of those images is roughly 4.5 terabytes. And I don't want to get too nerdy with terabytes and megabytes and gigabytes, but there are 1,000, if you may be more familiar with gigabytes, there are 1,000 gigabytes in a terabyte. So what does that really equate to? That's about 450,000 pictures if you were to have on your cell phone. That's a lot. So that,
Exceeded that limit, haven't you, Joanne?
so it's a lot of data that we're working. So that's why we don't want to grab absolutely everything every single time. It still has that full image each time, but it's as to what's moving over the network every hour, it's only what's changed. And then each of those backups is retained for roughly 11 months. It really just depends. It's a very difficult thing to calculate as to how long those will be stored, because it depends on how much data you have versus how much you can store on that device at a time. So you may have, 100 gigs of storage, and if each backup is 10 gigs, you're going to be able to store a lot more of those a lot longer than if each of those backups was 50 gigs, if that makes sense. So that's where we house our, sorry, question?
Commissioner Green?
And after the 11th month, I assume the data is just lost or
It is overwritten, correct? Yep.
Okay.
So these
what-
backups are not for the purpose of FOIA.
Correct.
That is another good thing to mention.
Say that again?
These backups are not for the purpose of FOIA. These backups are for the purpose of a disaster recovery only. For the purpose of FOIA, staff have been informed they need to keep those files in a location that is not deleted. So if a file is deleted with the intent to recover it, should there be a FOIA request 3 years from now, that is not the intent of this solution.
But we can still do that if we need to.
We can restore it up to 11 months, correct? So we are backing those files and those settings up here locally. So Commissioner Green, to your point, what happens if there's a fire in that room and that entire rack is destroyed? So each night, those backups are moving to the cloud. So with our backup solution, the solution we use is called Datto. Similar to Office 365, their data is hosted in the cloud. So for their locations, they have a primary location in Reading, Pennsylvania, and then they have a secondary in Bluffdale, Utah. So our documents and all of our settings are stored here on site, and they are stored on those other 2 locations through the Datto cloud. So if there is a fire, that rack is unusable, we are able to turn our network through the firewall to one of those images in the cloud, and staff are able to get back to work in roughly 30 to 60 minutes. So that rack can be completely destroyed and we have things back up and running very quickly. So those,
Commissioner Green?
So what's the possibility of that data being hacked?
again, I will never say never, right? So it is a possibility. The chances are very slim. With a company like Datto, similar to Office 365 with Microsoft, they have a massive team of engineers and cybersecurity specialists that maintain and oversee that data. So it is possible. The chances are very slim.
Commissioner Smers.
If I remember right, doesn't Datto also do medical records?
That I'm not sure about.
If they do, I know it'll be extremely secure.
Yeah,
So,
that's very possible. Datto is a very large competitor in the field of backups, so it's very possible. So those are applications to the cloud. So when we take those hourly backups every day to that appliance in the rack, every night after hours, around the midnight, 1 o'clock area in the morning, it is replicating those changes through the day to the cloud for the purpose of disaster recovery. So again, if there were a fire in the room, or if there's just a mechanical failure of any kind, what happens? So we pay through HP for a support subscription for a 6-hour call to repair. So that applies to all of our core network switches and all of our server equipment. Should there be an equipment failure, fire, anything like that, that equipment is either going to be repaired or replaced within 6 hours. There will be a tech on site.
Really?
And it'll be repaired. There may be some downtime. And that's what we kind of need to weigh, right? Is what is the benefit to, or how do we want to balance the cost versus the expected downtime? So the cost here, as I have for the 6-hour call to repair for all of that equipment, is $21,000 annually. That at max should be roughly 6 hours of downtime for staff. The other option is to have a completely duplicate server system, as I showed you, in another room off site somewhere to use in the event of a failure. So it's essentially just sitting there 364 days out of the year waiting for an emergency. For that kind of server system, it's in all of our switches, it'll be north of $400,000. So this 6-hour call to repair for 21,000 versus the estimated small amount of downtime for staff is a much more efficient option, in our opinion, in the case of some kind of failure. Any questions before I move on from disaster recovery? Okay. So I'll get in a little bit for security. So network wise, we kind of talked about it a little bit. We have a firewall at each yard that are accessed over the VPN. For staff, when they are working from home, and as some of you have used, we have a VPN for you to get into the network as well. So you sign into the application on your computer, and then on your cell phone, you receive a prompt that says, is this really you signing in? That's the multi-factor authentication. So that is just another level to say, is this really you getting in? You can say yes, and then it'll let you through. If somebody were to obtain your credentials overseas or wherever, they would need your physical phone to follow that second prompt to get in all the way. So they could have your password and log in and everything, but they still can't get in because they don't have your phone to grant that extra layer of protection.
So don't lose your phone.
So don't lose your phone. And also to that point is if you do receive a request and you're not trying to log in, you should not approve that request because that would mean somebody else is trying to log in to you. On the staff side, for user accounts, we've enabled password complexity a while ago. So what's that mean? It means every 90 days, you'll receive a prompt on your computer to change your password. It's a little different for commissioners. We don't have that set for you just because you're off site most of the time. For those that are here working on site, the requirement is to change it every 90 days. And then it must have 3 of the 4 categories. So either a capital letter, a lowercase, a number, or a special character. And then again, we have multi-factor authentication for our Office 365 sign-ins. So your email, OneDrive, SharePoint, any of those, if they were to sign in either with a new password or from a new location or from a new device, they'll sign in with their username and password, and then it'll prompt them on their phone for the security code. And then we have automatic phishing alerts set up too. So a lot of tools in place that if somebody's account were to be compromised, Josh and my team, we have ways that we get alerts that has happened, and we're able to reach out to the person and get that rectified. Or if we're not able to reach them, we're able to shut the account down temporarily to make sure that nobody's able to get into the network. And then physical security. So all of our racks and servers are behind closed and locked doors. Those can only be accessed by my team and by our facilities teams for the purpose of maintaining the air conditioning equipment that are in those rooms. Those rooms are locked down to very few people for that reason. And then during the day, we make sure that we're not in the room, that door is locked and closed. And then I'll get into this more as well too. But we added new cameras and card readers to all of the rooms as well. So we can see, instead of a physical key, who went in there on Friday at 3 o'clock. We can not only can we see it on the camera, but we can see it as they swipe their badge to get into the door. It's a lot easier to maintain than who all has a physical key that we now have to go and question and who was in there. Questions
Mr.
on
Green?
security?
Just kind of curious. The racks and servers are behind locked doors.
Yes.
So how many people have access to that?
I would need to pull a list as actually how many, but I believe it's less than 10. So it would be the 3 of us. It would be the 4 facilities employees, and then 1 or 2 from Applied Innovation. Any other questions on security? Okay. Next thing is software. So we manage a lot of different applications. So while we have kind of a handful of just core applications that are hosted on our servers, there are a lot of supporting pieces of software that make those applications and other applications run. If you go into your control panel on your computer and you look at all of the different programs that are on there, there is a list of supporting software. So that's where we come up with our 1,182 applications. So if you look at our system where we have everything monitored and documented, we're going to come up with that many different pieces of software that we need to monitor for vulnerabilities. The software that we use to do that is really good at pulling those vulnerability reports for us and alerting us automatically. But it is something still that we need to kind of keep an eye on, that in the news, if there's a hack or something on SQL or whatever it may be, we can go in very easily and say, hey, do we have that in our environment somewhere? And what do we need to do to rectify that or update it to get it to where it's not vulnerable anymore?
Commissioner McCollum.
Chris, so we changed over, we were doing DocuSign
Yes,
and we changed over to Adobe.
yes.
So the security, it seemed like DocuSign was very secure, you're always having to change your password and stuff. How was does ours meet up with their security?
Yeah, Adobe, again, a very reputable company. You're signed into that with your account as well. We can set up two-factor authentication for you on there if you would like, just to have an extra layer of security. We haven't pushed that out as a mandatory feature for everybody yet, but yeah, the Adobe's a very secure program as well.
Okay, thank you.
And that change was not, we were already using Adobe, but we were not using it to the capacity of digital signatures that we were DocuSign. That was a change that came down from MDOT. So MDOT was hosting our accounts with DocuSign and then opted not to go forward with that program. I think DocuSign may no longer exist, or shortly will no longer exist. So that was their reasoning for moving on. They went to OneSpan, which I think you'll have to use a little bit. They host that, but then for the purpose of staff in our building that need to digitally sign things that may not be for MDOT, that's where we've implemented digital signatures with Adobe.
Thank you.
So software is truly, other than the hardware for the server room, annually software is one of our biggest expenses. So this 165,000, we're actually a little over that as of last week, but we're still under $170,000 on the year for software. So that's software licensing for our Office 365, our subscriptions for the 6-hour call to repair, things like that. And then we have a list of some of our core software. So like I said, 365, the Adobe Acrobat, as we spoke about, and then AutoCAD is also a very large price tag, and so is our WCRC Fix-It or our C-Click Fix. Those are some of our biggest costs when it comes to our software budget. And then some of the support licenses, as I mentioned, the server and switch and the firewall, the call to repairs for those, and then our vendor and our support license with our MSP Applied Innovation. Questions on software? So as far as our hardware replacement, so now we're getting into some of the equipment that our staff use. So cell phones, laptops, desktops, this is our replacement schedule as to how long those are used. We try not to use equipment until failure, because then that leads to downtime for staff. So we try to be proactive as to when we expect that computer or cell phone to kind of be on its last leg, and then we replace it before that happens. We're not always successful. We may have one or two that kind of die before that's expected. But for the most part, this schedule has worked very well for us. And as you can see, we have a lot of cell phones, a lot of laptops in use. Some things we do replace at failure. Security cameras is one of those. They last for a very long time, and they're usually pretty easily replaceable. So now I want to get into the help desk. So this is where Josh really comes through and shows how much he contributes or really outdoes Dan and myself at this point. So you'll see in the years past, our numbers are pretty similar. You can see where my team and I took over in 2018 and really started pushing the use of the help desk to be able to get these metrics. Our days to resolve is very low. That was not the case, back in 2018, 2017. And Josh is really to thank for that. Here's a breakdown by month. So we can kind of use this data to analyze, when are kind of our peak seasons that staff are going to need the most help, or, what caused this spike. So for instance, in March that first spike, we had a update to our financial software that did not go very well. It led to a lot of problems. We were able to rectify those problems, but it led to a large influx in tickets for those months. And as you'll see too, in the June and July months are usually pretty low. A lot of people are on vacation in the summer. So just kind of neat to see, where do we typically see spikes or lulls. But this slide, as I mentioned, Josh does a really great job. This slide really shows just how much he's doing outside of Dan and I, so that we can do a little bit more project management, or if we're sitting in meetings or whatever it is. And he does an excellent job with the easiest of questions and the hardest of questions. He never belittles anybody on the phone if somebody's calling in for something that may be something very easy, or just, as Dan said, a user error or things like that. He's never going to be one that says, well, this is your fault. He's very, does a very nice job of helping that person, and making sure it gets resolved. And as such, same for the difficult issues too. He does a nice job that if it is something a little more complex, he's going to find that answer, or he's going to reach out for help without belaboring it too. And then the last thing on the help desk, so this is kind of a list of what are some of the types of tickets that we see. The biggest one, and it's really kind of our catch-all, is just our assistance request or how to. So those remain, hey, how do I do this? Or, I did this way the other day and now it's not working. Those are really what we see the most. Software problems, I'm gonna skip network for a minute. Software problems, that would be, if there's an update or something and now it's giving an error, what caused that? And then printer support, things like that. So if you'll notice, network issue and slowness is very high this year. And I will get into that in a few more slides, but I'll come back to that in a minute. Just kind of keep that in the back of your head. Why is network issue and slowness so high? So I want to speak on our processes. So we do have a few processes. So when a new employee is brought on, we have our onboarding. So we're typically informed either by HR or by the hiring manager of what that employee's name is, what their title is going to be, and what their access level should be. So as long as we're able to receive that information at least a week or so before that employee starts, we are able to guarantee that they have a laptop and resources on day one. A lot of companies don't necessarily do that. They may have an employee that has to sit there and read a handbook for 2 days while their equipment's being prepared. We really pride ourselves on making sure that that employee is ready to go and has the equipment they need on day one. And then we do an onboarding process through them. Alicia's done a nice job restructuring that process and including us. So we're able to get through, get their passwords changed, get them into their accounts, show them how to use the laptop all on day one when they're getting all kinds of overwhelming information. And then for access requests, if there is a staff member that may be taking on something new and says, hey, I need access to this location on the file server or whatever it may be, or in the financial software, we make sure that we receive written permission from their hiring manager or the department head before we grant that permission. And that's also a requirement by our auditors as well. And then same for employee separation. So if someone were leaving, HR informs us that person's leaving, then their date and time that they are taking their last step out the door, and we make sure that their accounts are terminated and disabled right at that time. That goes Office 365, that's computer access. We make sure that computer's back in our hands, that cell phone, their badge to get into the building. All that terminates right at the moment that HR tells us they are no longer here.
Commissioner Green?
How long is data retained for employees who are separated?
It depends. Some of that data is on the file server for those 11 months that we spoke about earlier. For the email, we typically hold that for 30 days or until the hiring manager says they're finished with it. So when an employee leaves, we usually grant that access. We block that access from the employee so their password no longer works, so they can't get in through a web browser or anything on a personal computer. But then we delegate that access to their supervisor to go through and find anything they may need to grab or respond to or anything like that. And we'll direct an out of office message to that supervisor. So anybody trying to contact that person knows that they're no longer here and you need to reach out to, whoever it may be. So to answer your question, roughly 30 days, unless the hiring manager or unless the supervisor tells us they need it longer.
I can speak firsthand to that, and Chris does a very nice job. For example, when Emily Kaiser left last December, I had access to all of her information for a period of time. Chris said, are you still using this? Do we, and just followed up to the point where I'm not looking at it anymore. I don't need this any longer. So then at that point, Chris removes that access for that. Same thing with Carrie Ryan when she retired. So Chris does a very nice job of following up so that it's not perpetual. It's just for that period of time. And then as the person who's filling in or helping with the transition, you have that available. It feels nice to have that as a backup if you think you need it. And then when you realize I haven't looked at this in, 2 weeks or a month or whatever, it's nice to get rid of it.
Yep, and again, a lot of that is held for those 11 months. As well. So if
Mhm.
Cheryl were to say, hey, I'm finished with this, and then 2 months later, she says, oh, wait, is there anything still in there? We can still go back at least for those 11-ish months and try to pull from backup if we need to.
Commissioner Green?
And so if there's a situation where an employee is terminated
Sure.
in a year longer and a year later, he files a lawsuit for wrongful termination.
Sure.
Do we have any data to support why that person has been terminated? I mean, is there something on
Sure.
file somewhere that we can look to?
Good question. So yes and no. So if we are completely blindsided by something like that,
Right.
we can only go back those 11 months. That's correct. In an instance where we may suspect that there will be something like that, we usually rely on HR to tell us, or the supervisor to say, hey, there was a situation, this person was let go, we need to archive some of this. And we'll make sure we do that, and we hold on to that for longer than those 11 months. We'll make sure it is maintained on the server. But from the IT perspective, we really rely on HR to tell us when there's going to be a situation like that.
Yeah, that's exactly. HR is usually taking the lead on that. So whatever the reason behind the termination would be, HR is usually the one who's documenting along with whoever that the supervisor of that employee may be, so that we have that documented. If we need to, we'll be working with IT to make sure we don't lose anything. But for the most part, HR is usually the one who's documenting that.
But that data is kept for how long?
Whatever would be appropriate for the records retention. And if we have end up with an active lawsuit, then that becomes clearly we hang on to it at that point.
Dan Ackerman, Director of Finance and IT. Our financial software doesn't have an HR component. And there are things as discipline and tracking that human resources enters into the system for each employee. And when they terminate, eventually they get archived, but they remain on the system. So if there were some issues, we could pull up all their HR records in our financial system, and all the documentation would be there. So I don't know if that gets a little more to your question, but we do retain those records.
Yes, but for how long? I'm just wondering.
In perpetuity in the financial system.
Oh, okay.
We can still access their employee records.
Right. Well, employee records are held
Right.
in perpetuity, so to
Right.
speak.
Which includes discipline, and there's an HR component to our financial software that has a lot of the documentation that HR is making for each employee, and that is retained in the system.
Right. But that's all following the state records retention, which
Right.
that is how personnel files are held in perpetuity
Okay,
as part of the state records retention
sure.
program, if that
I mean,
makes
I just
sense.
had this situation where a lawsuit was filed and we can't retrieve some information that might be crucial to our defense.
Sounds like
Sure,
it's
yeah.
held.
So if there is a termination, as I said, when there is a termination of that nature, we're usually in the loop with HR on that, because it's usually a very sudden, we need to terminate these accounts, to which then we are, hey, what do we need? Do we need something archived from this? Do we need to retain their email longer? What does it need to be? And as Dan and Cheryl said, we'll hold on to that as long as we need to, or until someone says, we no longer need this. It's going to stay on the server until otherwise.
And to my knowledge, we've never had an issue if we're in a situation like that we needed to produce documentation to prove or disprove.
Mhm.
We've always been able to provide that information.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question, though. A good example too, we had an instance where we needed to pull footage from our security cameras a few weeks ago. And we're able to do the same thing. We're able to pull that footage, because that footage only remains for a couple months. So we're able to pull, something happened, we're able to pull that footage. We now store that footage in a secure location until we're for sure that it's no longer needed.
I see.
Any other questions on processes as it relates to hiring and leaving? So also with our with our staff. As far as process, we ask if there is a support need, there's multiple ways to get a hold of IT. So one of those ways is to submit a help desk ticket, which I believe all of you have done at some point, or most of you. That ticket's going to go to our entire team, and then one of us will pick it up and we're able to reach out to you. Another option is if you are in a situation where you need help immediately, you're able to call us at our help desk phone number, and that's going to route to the person who's available for that day. The reason for this structure is not because I don't want to help you. The reason for this structure is so that we make sure you're being routed to someone who's available. 90% of the time, Josh, myself, or Dan is available in that help desk queue to help you if there is something emergent. You know, I may be, if I'm off for the week and you're reaching out to me individually, leaving me voicemail after voicemail, I may not see it until the following Monday. So if you're able to call this phone number or submit a ticket, that's going to the whole team. We can make sure somebody responds to you pretty timely. And then it also feeds into our metrics so we can see what are the things that most people are calling about. And then it also provides a history for you yourself. Hey, Josh helped, Commissioner McCollum with this the other day. He's off today and she's having the problem again. What did he do? And I don't have to duplicate any of the steps that he did trying to fix the issue. We can pick up where he left off and try something. Any questions there? Also for staff, we do provide some training. So we do our IT power hours. We've had kind of a few amount of those this year, but so far we've done one on OneDrive, and then we recently just had one on Adobe Digital Signatures. So our power hours, they are just usually in the lunch hour area. Typically when people have time to sit down at their laptop, eat their lunch, they can tune in and see, hey, what are we diving into today? So it's typically either new applications or applications where we've had a request from staff to dive into it a little deeper, or if we see a lot of, again, with our help desk metrics, if we're getting a lot of calls on a specific program, we may do a help or a power hour to get into some of the settings and do kind of a training. And then we allow staff to ask questions for the second half of that. So typically our power hours are an hour. We present for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we open it up for questions and discussion afterwards, or to run through different scenarios or whatever it may be. We also do our annual cybersecurity training. So that's coming up in November this year. I'm working with engineering and operations to make sure that we don't require that over a busy time when we're plowing snow or trying to wrap up construction season. So the leadership team and I decided that November might be a good month for that this year. Last year we did August, and it was a little hit and miss with kind of wrapping up construction season. So we're going to try November this year and see if that works a little better for staff to be able to have the time to sit down and do that. As like last year, you kind of go at your own pace. You could finish it in 20 minutes, but it may take someone else about 40, but it should be less than an hour for sure. It'll be a series of videos and a couple short quizzes just to make sure you retain some of the information. And then we'll get a report, make sure everybody completed it. This is actually a requirement by our cybersecurity insurance as well. So not only is it just good information to know both at work and with your home equipment, but it is required by our cybersecurity insurance to show that we are training staff on cybersecurity and some of the more basic hacking attempts. So if there is something that were to happen where we would need to file a claim, we can say, well, we did educate staff, and something still happened anyway. We aren't kind of just blind to what's out there.
And that's a requirement for board members as well as
It is,
employees.
yes. So it is a requirement for anyone that has access to our network. So yep, you'll all be seeing an email from us in November. Constant nagging to get that done. So thank you in advance.
Well, and what's nice is you can do a module, and then if you can't sit there for the rest of it, you can log out and take it back up later.
Exactly. You can do it at your own time, do it at your own pace. As you said, you can do it 10 minutes at a time every Tuesday until you're finished. It's a lot better than coming in and listening to me talk for an hour. I guarantee that. So, and then the last thing there with cybersecurity. So the cybersecurity really hits hard on phishing attempts. So we do our own phishing attempts and testing. So every month, everybody here gets at least one email from us, and it'll be different. It won't be the same for everybody. That'll try to phish or gain access to your account. It may have a link that says, click here to reset your password. We will never email you to reset your password. That's going to be fake 100% of the time. But we do those phishing and trainings, and it's not to be oh, we got you or anything like that, but to say, hey, where's our training failing, or how can I help this person recognize these a little easier? That's it for the infrastructure side. Any questions on anything so far? I want to get into projects next. Cool. So completed projects for this year, we've had a lot of them. So every year we have our computer refresh. As you saw, we replace computers every 3 to 4 years. So this year we really focused hard on our kiosks, which are the time card systems at each of the yards. So each yard has a different amount of those. If you step outside this door here behind Commissioner Green, you'll see one, just a small desktop computer that they can clock in, charge their materials for the day, and then clock out at the end of the day. If you walk out into the driver break room, there's 5 or 6 of them out there. So we have 21 of those total throughout all of the yards. So we replaced all of those this year. And then we also replaced the 13 digital sign computers. So as you walk into the back hallway, you'll see, or out here in the lobby, you'll see the TVs with the radar and the information to staff. So those were due this year as well. And then we did 19 user computers this year too. So a little low on the user computer side. We did about 50 or so last year. And that's what we tried to stagger it as best we can to make these kind of even every year, both from a work perspective and from a budget perspective. Sometimes we get a grant that might allow us to buy more computers than expected. So we might shift some people up in the schedule. So that's why there's kind of the lopsided user computers this year versus last year. So last year we received a grant, thanks to the engineering Brent and his traffic and safety team. We were able to do about 20 extra last year in advance of this year to get those in early with the grant. And then that kind of offsetted our numbers a little bit. So we were able to do the kiosks and digital signs this year.
Commissioner Green?
It's also nice to see that the old phones are resold and we're able to recoup
Yeah, so
that money.
the phone project, that's exactly what I was going to get into next. We did a very nice job on the phone project this year.
Sure.
So when we first budgeted for this project, we try to replace the phones every 2 years. We were probably pushing 2.5, just because we know Samsung has committed to a new phone every year, and they typically announce that in February. With that, we typically receive a government discount or a promotional discount when that new flagship phone's announced, as long as we sign up for another 2-year contract, which we are going to do anyways. So we tried to push those off to February. We expected those to be about $350 a phone based on previous years. The promotion actually ended up being about $50 a phone.
Oh my word.
So that was a huge savings. That took our budget. We budgeted $40,000 for phones and new cases for all of those. There's all kinds of accessories you have to get for phones, right? You need the phone, you need the case. Some people want a screen protector, charge cable, things like that. So 40,000 included phones for 72 people, accessories for 72 people. We were able to, with that promotion, take that budget from 40,000 down to 7,600. So it was quite a substantial savings. And then we were able to resell. We offer those phones for resale to staff. If they liked the phone they had, if they want to buy it and use it for their personal use, they are welcome to. We sell based on the model. They may buy it for $50 or $100, basically what the phone's worth at that point after 2 years of usage. Those that are not purchased by staff, we have a resale vendor that we go to, so that we're still able to recuperate some of that cost. So we were able to sell those for about just over $2,000. I thought I had it in my notes here. But at the end of the day, a project that we thought was going to cost about $40,000 ended up costing $4,800. So that's a pretty good deal for 72 brand new Samsung flagship phones. So that was a good project. We also changed our approach to how we upgraded those this year. In the past, we've scheduled with each person individually and brought them in, taken their phone for a couple hours, upgraded it, and given it back to them. In the last 2 upgrades that I've been a part of, that approach has taken 4 to 6 months, trying to do 2 or 3 a day. As you see in the picture, Dan and Josh and I all took a week and just hunkered down in the assembly room downstairs and gave people windows to come in and assembly lined it, and we were able to knock a lot of those out in a week. I think we did maybe 45 or 50 in that week period. So that was a much more efficient way to do it. And I think we'll definitely do it that way again in the next couple of years when it comes time again. Moving on to some other complete projects, our Wi-Fi revamp. We changed the way the Wi-Fi works in the building. In the past, there were a couple different networks. There was the network for your laptop, which gave you access to all the network sources and the servers. That was one password that everybody used. So it was the ID, I think, was Road Commission Private or something like that. And then it was just one password that everyone had to try to remember to get into it. The change we made enables you to use your same computer password to connect. So use your same computer ID and password, which changes every 90 days, as we said earlier, whereas that other shared password did not change. So if there were any vendors or guests or anybody that somehow came across that password, they were able to connect to that network. So now it's limited to or tied to your computer password and credentials. We know who's connecting and we can see which access point you're connected to. It's a lot more secure that way. The other thing that we,
Excuse me, Chris, Commissioner McCollum.
Yes, on my personal phone to make a call out, it won't accept, even though I'm on the Wi-Fi guest, it won't accept it to make a call out. Is that part of this?
it's not, no, we can
Oh.
certainly take a look at that. for you.
Okay, all right, thanks.
No, so yeah, so anybody, so the other side of that too is not only do you need your computer credentials to connect, we've also limited it or whitelisted only our own devices.
Mm.
So even if, say someone were to come in and they had your password for whatever reason and they had their personal device, or they were to try to sit in the parking lot and use your personal device, their device is not registered on our network. So they still have to have what we call the MAC address or the physical address of each of our laptops listed on the server to be able to connect in the first place. So there's two levels of security there. It has to be an approved device that we know the address of, and then it also has to be your login credentials. For the guest network, that is open though. That's an open network. There's no password, and that's intentional so that when guests come in, if they didn't, we had a lot of instances where they didn't obtain the password from the front desk when they checked in, and now they're in a conference room trying to present and nobody remembers what the password is. So the guest network is completely sealed off from our main network, and there's no password to connect to that. So as long as Wi-Fi calling is enabled on your phone, you should be able to use that. So we can certainly check that out afterwards.
Thank you.
And as I spoke about earlier, Office 365 multi-factor authentication. So that was mandated for all users or anyone that has a road commission email address. That was mandated mid this year. When we did our cell phone project, we really got a lot of people set up that way. That's not only is that a good idea or a good concept to implement, but it's also required by Microsoft at the end of this year. They will be forcing that. So we wanted to make sure we were proactive and getting people set up with that and knowing what they were doing before, Microsoft just flips the switch and turns it on for everybody. Some physical improvements. So we added a lot more proximity readers. So as you know, there's one on this boardroom now, there's one on the elevator that really helps secure the lobby. Because before anybody could come in from the parking lot, take the elevator to any floor in this building or walk through the boardroom if it wasn't locked. We also added the card readers on all of our IT rooms. We have the two upstairs and then the phone room down in the basement, and then some of the stock rooms out in the garage now have that. Absolutely every exterior door now has one. We were getting to where, foremen were having to go around and lock all the doors at the end of every day with a key. So now we're able to put those on a schedule and they no longer have to do that. And again, we can see, who swiped in on Saturday, why were they here, that kind of thing. The other thing we improved were our security cameras, and I have an image on the next page. Before we had, just go there now. So if you've been out in the employee parking lot, you may have noticed a new camera dome over that corner of the building. As you're walking in the door, there's one there, there's one on the north side, and there's one on the west side out between the garage and the fuel island. So those are 360-degree cameras. Where they're mounted, we're really only using about 180 of that because the back of the building blocks the second half of that 180. But if you look across or horizontally, the top row there, that's the dome camera that's facing the employee parking lot as you drive in. That middle one there is the north side, and then the bottom one there is the west side. So we can see all of our buildings. Before, the cameras were only zoomed in on the gate, so we could only see people coming in and out of the gate itself. We couldn't see the parking lot. We couldn't see who walked in the door. We couldn't see employees' cars if something happened to a vehicle for any reason. Something was hit, maybe, whatever it may be. This just gives us a full perimeter of the building to see what's going on out there, or maybe after hours. And then we have, not pictured here, we have one in the canopy outside the lobby too, as you walk in the main entrance. So that'll grab the front parking lot there. So this was a big improvement. We also changed the software that we were using. The software we were using before was a little clunky, and it really seemed to bog down the computers of the people that were trying to use it. But the new software has a really nice feature. I had to use it the other day, actually. You can draw a square anywhere on the image. So if I were to pick this top middle image, and I only wanted, say I only wanted, I think it'll work here. Say I only wanted motion. Sorry, oh, that's not working out. Anyway, say I only wanted motion from the sidewalk there. So I knew somebody came in the building at a certain time. If I draw that square around there, it's only going to search for motion in that square and pull up any motion results. So that is a huge feature when you're trying to go through and see something that walked past. If it's something that is in the frame and disappeared, it's easy to kind of seek through until you find that it's gone and then kind of reverse. But when it's something that's passing through, it's very difficult to try to find what that was. So this software gives us a lot more ability there to investigate, and it's focused, or it works through a web browser. So it doesn't bog down staff's computers as much as it was before.
So can you tell us about the security for the lobby and the front door? None of those images are.
Yeah, I don't have images for them here. There are 4 cameras.
Okay.
So there's one in the canopy that faces the parking lot. There's one in the northwest corner of the lobby that faces the lobby and the door. And then there's one over each desk, the permits desk and the reception desk, that faces out to see, who's talking to Emma or to Callie when they come in.
Okay.
And then we have, as I said, we have card readers on the front door. That one's on a schedule, so that'll be unlocked during business hours. After hours, it locks that door automatically. And then we have the one on the boardroom door. We have one on both permits and the administrative side. And then we have one on the elevator that all require a card swipe, except for the boardroom during working sessions or the board meeting. That'll be on a schedule as well. So I'm happy to send you those images if you'd like them.
No, because they're not here, I needed the reassurance that it was.
Sure. Yeah.
That you were watching.
Yeah, absolutely.
Emma and Callie and.
Yeah, absolutely. They are. I just put in the new cameras here. So
Okay.
I can certainly send those to you. Any other questions on physical security? Okay. So a couple other smaller projects that we did. One of them was conference room 106. As you know, a few years ago, we upgraded the technology in 200 and 234 and in this room and the assembly room. So 106 was the last room, last conference room that had not been upgraded yet. So that room, which is just over here on the south side of the building in the permits area, that now has full Microsoft Teams equipment. It has the interactive touch display, the camera to be on Teams, and the speaker system in there. And then on the right side, Dan's spoken about this in a lot of his reports, is the ergonomic desks. So this is a picture from my office. There's just a tabletop desk that lifts. We probably installed about 24 of these for staff, and the response to these has been very good. People have been very appreciative. It is kind of weird to walk around and see faces over the cube walls now, but I have absolutely loved mine. It's made such a difference, especially if I'm in a meeting or something, to stand up. And if I'm not necessarily participating much in the meeting, I tend to kind of drone or maybe do some other things on my other monitor. If I'm able to stand up, I just find that I focus a lot better on it. So, and for somebody that's sitting most of the day, it's nice to kind of stand with someone else. So the response to those has been very good. Also, I want to make sure I say thanks to our facilities team as well. Kevin, Will, Randy, Dennis, they all did a great job helping Josh and I get these unboxed, get them out and distributed. There was a lot of manual work that had to go into that. Jeff Mann and Warren Koppel, they also helped bring them all over from the delivery. They brought them over on the forklift, stacked them outside the doors here, really nice for us. And then the facilities guys helped unpack these, take care of all the trash. Dennis and Will were going around moving monitors over, putting the desk and putting the monitors back on so that Josh and I could just go around and tidy up the cabling or or plugged things back in as we needed. So, yeah, facilities, and then Jeff and Warren, they were great help on this project.
Commissioner McCollum and Commissioner Smers, did you two have questions?
I just had a comment, a question, I guess. In the conference room that we have our closed sessions,
Yes, 200.
the monitors there are excellent. Are those the touchscreen ones, or they're just?
The larger screen is the touch screen, yes. So it's got a whiteboard feature. It has some built-in applications, so you can stand up there and do it that way. If you don't want to sit at your computer, you can stand up there and touch and move things around.
The quality is excellent.
Yeah, they've been-
It's like the person is there in the
Yeah.
room.
They've been really nice. So, and actually it didn't make my PowerPoint. We just did it last week. But we installed motion sensors in all those rooms too. So what those motion sensors do is they turn off the room. One of the issues we've seen is that after staff use it, they don't always turn the room off. It's kind of in the back of their head. They're, wrapping up their meeting, or they're walking out talking to somebody after the meeting, and it just gets left on. That kind of shortens the life, not so much on the displays, but the room that we really have that issue is the assembly room, and that the bulb in that projector is a very expensive bulb. It's about $2,000 to replace. So we want to make sure that's getting turned off. So what these motion sensors will do, if you go into those rooms later, there'll be it's a little dome, and when you move, there's a green light that lights up to know that they caught your motion. So the intent there is, if the room's been empty and there's seen no movement in 30 minutes, it'll shut everything down nicely for us, and we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Awesome,
Yeah.
excellent.
So
Thank you.
it's still a little hiccups there. We just installed them last week, so we'll get those ironed out. But yeah, that's been the latest addition to those rooms.
Jeff, did you have a question? No? Okay.
So that's everything for completed projects. So some of our ongoing projects. So earlier, if you remember in the help desk numbers, our network and slowness tickets were very high. They were at number 2 this year. The reason for that, we have been closely monitoring how often our outside yards lose internet connection. So we have set up automatic alerting from our firewalls at those yards to send us a ticket every time that network goes down. So it's helpful, one, so we can come in the morning and say, oh, it's network's down in Chelsea, but it's also helpful to say, hey, do we need to do something else here? So that is where, and Commissioner Fuller, I believe it was your question earlier, do the outside yards have fiber? So that is an ongoing project at the moment. We were able to determine, yeah, they're losing internet quite a lot out there on the shared coax line that they're using through Comcast. We're going to install, or have Comcast install rather, a dedicated fiber line. So those projects are in the works. Yards 2 and 3, the fiber cable has been ran into the building. We are still waiting on Comcast to finish up some of the configuration that they need to do on their end before they bring out the new router and have those racked. Yard 4 in Manchester, I believe we're still waiting on permitting for that. So no construction or anything has been done there yet. We're hopeful to have these done by the end of the year, but we're kind of on Comcast's timeline here. So yeah,
I'd be very interested if Comcast is being difficult.
we can talk.
For the record, that's characteristic of that company,
It is, yeah.
not just here, but everywhere.
Unfortunately, we're kind of stuck with some of these yards in Manchester and in Chelsea. But yeah, the experience has not been what I would call great, I guess we'll say. So,
And there is Midwest Energy and Communication that's building fiber coming up from the south. They're in Manchester Township
I
right
have
now.
been paying attention to that very closely too. So both from a business perspective and my home perspective in Tecumseh, I've been watching that very closely as well.
And I don't know how you can blend ISPs, but if I had my way.
Yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, there's a lot to be desired there. I agree.
I
Question?
can tell you the personal use, the other company's much nicer to deal with than Comcast.
MEC, yeah.
MEC is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Comcast is impossible.
I would agree. So hopefully, yeah. So anyway, so we're hopeful to get that completed this year. A dedicated fiber line, regardless of the company, should make a big improvement for those yards. Because whenever it goes down, we saw it in Manchester, they were down for a good week after the ice storm in February. They were down a couple days again after this most recent storm. And when that happens, even if it's a 5-10 minute outage, it knocks everything off out there. The foreman has to go and reset the camera. He has to reset the call button for the ladies in communications to answer the gate phone. There's a lot, he has to reset his printer. There's a lot of things that interrupts when that kind of goes down out there for them. So this should be a big improvement.
So why aren't we shopping for a new ISP? Are we tied somehow to Comcast?
We're not tied. It's just the availability in the area. We also receive with our bundled package with the bulky package that we have here to add those onto our contract. The price point is very nice. I'm certainly paying attention to others.
Trust your judgment.
I hear what you're saying. Comcast is not my favorite either, but at this moment, it is unfortunately the best option. And once it's in place, it's like I said at this yard, once it was in place, it's been great. It's just getting there that's the struggle. So the picture on the right is the new rack that we have in Manchester. Chelsea is very similar. So that's been another nice improvement with this project. Before, everything was just kind of on a shelf above the foreman's desk. Now we've got it racked really nicely and awaiting that equipment. The next project that is still ongoing is our OneDrive migration. So if you remember in the past, all of your documents were linked to what we refer to as the Z drive, which pointed to our file server in our network rack upstairs. We are migrating those off of that server to OneDrive. So OneDrive is already included for every staff member with an email account. So if you have an email account, you have available 1 terabyte of storage space on your OneDrive. So it's already a service we're paying for. We just hadn't been taking advantage of it because we liked the way that we had our files set up at the time. We have decided now we'd like to be able to, now that we are more in tune with the 365 package, it's now time to move those files over to the OneDrive side. So what that'll also do is remove the need for an on-site file server. And then it gives a lot more features to staff with OneDrive as far as sharing documents or being able, the biggest thing is being able to work on those documents simultaneously with other staff or in a meeting. A lot of times we'll be in meetings and someone may have the PowerPoint or the Excel sheet pulled up on the big screen in 200 and others can be in it at the same time. We're all making edits as we talk about it at the same time. And that's been a nice change. So these migrations are taking, it just depends on how much data each person has. But these migrations are taking about 1 to 2 hours a person. So it's been a very slow project, but we're getting pretty close to being done. So our plan is, we were just speaking this morning in our touch base. We plan to have this finished by the end of the calendar year.
Any questions? I have one. So where's the W drive anymore? Is W drive still there?
Yep, WNX are still there.
Okay.
Yep, and I'll get into that in
Haven't
some
looked
future
lately,
projects, but yeah, the plan eventually is to move those.
Okay.
Last thing on the ongoing projects, Dan and I are involved in a team with some other IT or finance directors from other counties. I think there's probably 6 or so of them on this committee that we kind of self-formed. The financial software that we and they use is not fulfilling the needs of our finance department. What's unfortunate is there are not really any other options. So there are really 2 different programs that road commissions use in the state of Michigan for their finance, and both of them have kind of not followed along with the times, I guess is the nicest way to say it. So we've kind of established this team to see, what else is out there, or can we look at other vendors that can build something that's going to meet all of our needs. There's concerns about the security of the program, the usability of the program. As I mentioned earlier, one of the peaks in our chart was, in our help desk chart in March, was an update to that software that did not go well. We had over 40 different issues from that software after the update. So a lot of questions in my mind about how you can release a major update and have that many issues for staff after an update. It just doesn't seem like it's being managed very well. So we're trying to do our due diligence to say, hey, is there something else out there? Can we work with a company to build something that's cloud-based and not have to run on our SQL server upstairs? Because the SQL server is another bear that we have to manage each day. I'm not sure where the traction is with it at the moment, but it is something that we're still trying to work with. Any questions? Yeah, absolutely.
Dan Ackerman, Director of Finance and IT. So this is, just to be clear, a CRA committee that was founded about a year ago, I believe. And it's primarily finance folks. I was not initially on the committee. They recognized early on they wanted somebody with more IT knowledge to join the team. So they asked Chris and he graciously said yes, which maybe he's regretting at times. And at some point, they had also extended the invitation to myself. And I guess I felt like, Chris shouldn't have to go this alone. So I am also on the committee. And, unfortunately for Chris, he has to endure, we get into the weeds, in my opinion, a little too much with the finance side of it. But it's just an opportunity to see what else is out there. As Chris mentioned, there are primarily two software companies that are out there for finance. Precision is what we have, and then Cogitate is more the smaller road commissions use Cogitate. At one point in time, it served a great purpose. But as Chris said, it's not necessarily keeping up with the times. And there are security issues and so on. So basically the committee just wants to see what else is out there, see if there's another viable option that maybe has more of the modern features that you look for in software, but still needs to do a lot of things because, again, we have payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, human resources, we've got equipment, inventory. So there's a lot of modules, and it makes sense for all of them to interface with one another. So it's really a very important initiative. May not be going as quickly as Chris or I would like as far as the research and, what options are out there, and cost is certainly a factor, especially some of the smaller road commissions are very concerned about cost. So with all those things, it's important for the committee to take their time. Again, we'd like to see a little more progress with it, but again, so this is a CRA committee. Initially, they had asked Chris to join the team, and then I joined the team as well. We try to meet every month or so. And there's a nice mixture of some of the larger road commissions, some of the smaller road commissions. People have Precision, people have Cogitate. So you get all those perspectives. There were some surveys that went out to managers as far as, what are your concerns or what would you like to see? They're working on another survey for the finance folks. So again, they want to get a lot of input and so on. And again, there are a lot of road commissions that are very concerned about this initiative, but again, no one will be forced to go if there's another product that this committee feels is a viable product. No road commissions will be forced to go. They can stay with where they are. It's just looking at another potential, more modern, more secure option. So I don't know if there's any other questions.
So where's the bottleneck? CRA staff isn't doing the research?
The bottleneck is, quite frankly, some of us finance folks getting into the weeds and talking about the structure of job numbers and, kind of focusing on some of the smaller details. Again, this is just my opinion. Chris may have a different one, or the others in the committee may have a difference of opinion. It's just, I guess I feel it should be moving a little quicker. And if you can see the software with road commission data, I think that will generate more questions or more light bulbs will go off. But it seems like it's been a challenge to get to that point. There's a conference for the Northern or for the UP. So they're concerned. They're doing a presentation up there. And there's a few other presentations that they've been preparing for, which, I think is kind of taking the focus away from, what the committee is supposed to look into. And again, this is a huge initiative. We want to make sure we get it right. So certainly you want to take your time. So we'll see. Hopefully this is the last presentation for a little while, and maybe they can get more focused on, getting road commission data in there, having demos and those things. So, we shall see, but, we are just members of the committee ultimately. So,
Yes, but we are dues paying members.
yeah, yep.
And it's not a small tab.
Correct. That's correct. And I know the director of CRA has joined us on occasion as well as they try and have staff members from CRA with us to make sure, to kind of check in, and certainly they've pledged their full support. As a matter of fact, I think there's some funding that's available for this initiative as well. There are some bills out there. I think they were finally approved.
As in invoices or as in?
As in that there's dollars available
Okay.
Standing
from the
up the
legislature,
software.
right?
I'm sorry?
standing up this new software.
Mhm.
There was an ask to the Michigan legislature for funds to help stand up a new software.
And
I believe
was-
that was in the last budget that was
Correct.
just
That was signed fairly recently.
just
correct.
signed.
Mhm.
There was two software packages that CRA has been supporting. And keep in mind that CRA is just providing the support for this committee. This committee is primarily, like Dan indicated, it's
Right.
finance directors. I think Chris is the only IT person that's on there. So it's CRA is providing the support, and certainly they worked with the legislators in order to get that pushed through as far as a funding priority went. But CRA itself is not really spearheading the committee, so to speak, if that makes sense.
I understand what you just said. I'm not sure it makes sense.
Okay, as long as you understood, it's all I can ask.
I believe so.
Certainly, if you'd like more details about the structure of the
Yeah.
committee,
I'm
you know,
interested in recommendations from people who know.
we do have minutes and, you know, we keep all that. And certainly Chris and I try to respectfully, you know, try to guide the committee a little bit, or, you know, so when can we look at demos, or when can we, you know, let's try and move forward on some of these other things. But, you know, certainly it is a committee of several other road commissions. So, you know, we have to reach consensus and all that. So, you know, a lot of it's somewhat controversial because a lot of people are pretty, and even I struggle a little bit because we've used precision for a long time and I'm very familiar with it and can do all the basic things I need it to do. But you know, you also need to keep an open mind as far as, you know, are things growing? And, you know, I shared earlier, technology changes all the time. And so is it keeping up with the times? Is there proper support? So I think a lot of it was really trying to reach all the other road commissions and tell them, you know, again, keep an open mind. This is just another option. You can retain what you have, but we're looking at something that's a more modern product that, you know, has everything in place that you need with, you know, today's technology. So.
We can
And-
certainly give you more information on this particular in-depth
Okay, sorry, didn't mean
effort.
to.
Nope, there was a similar effort
down
for
a rabbit hole.
construction management software as well, which ran a very parallel path. So
Yeah.
happy to bring you up to speed on all of that.
Any other questions on that? Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so that, the last section I have is just our upcoming projects and what some of the future looks like. So from 2024, again, we need to do our PC refresh. That's going to be an every year thing. It's just a matter of how many. So again, that kind of got out of whack with some of the grants that we received. So we'll only have about 8 next year. It's actually going to work really well because the next bullet point there is our Windows 11 rollout. So every computer is going to receive Windows 11 next year. That's
Wait a
going to
minute,
be
you're gonna take us to Windows 11 when?
next year.
As
Yep.
in January?
Well, no, not January, but at some point, yeah,
Are
some
we
point. next year.
obligated?
We are, unfortunately. So Windows 10 is going to go end of life in 2025. They haven't announced an official date in 2025 yet, other than to say 2025. So we want to make sure we're proactive on that. Dan and Josh, myself have been using it for a little while. It's not that big of a change. It's really just kind of an appearance change to how everything looks.
So I won't be able to find anything anymore. Jeff?
I just switched, so I just did updated last week and it was not my choice. It just decided to do it on its own to an upgrade and it did change the look.
Yep.
It does take a little bit to find some stuff, but other than that, everything pretty much works the same.
Yeah, so it will look different, and the reason for our team moving early is to try to find some of those differences and see if we can either change it back to make it look the old way, or however we can incorporate it into our training. The other part of this here is this year almost were unable to purchase new computers without Windows 11. We had to add on downgrade rights to Windows 10. Next year, I suspect we won't be able to do that. So we're going to have at least 8 staff receiving a new computer that has to have Windows 11 on it. So unfortunately, this is a little out of our control. When we update, the rest of the workforce is to an extent, but that is going to happen in 2024.
Joey, Sorry, Commissioner McCollum.
That's okay. Is there going to be a cost involved in this?
A good question, no. So the upgrade is free from Microsoft. It's just gonna
Good.
be a lot of kind of legwork on our side. Yeah. The next thing there is central document storage. So Commissioner Fuller, you asked about the W drive and the X drive. The intent is to move those to SharePoint to be able to be accessed through everyone's OneDrive and SharePoint and on the web. There will be a minor cost to that. We have SharePoint storage per, I think it's like 100 gigs per licensed email account. So we have a good bit with all of our staff that have a license. We'll need to add, I think it's about $2,000 or $3,000 worth of storage per year to be able to hold the whole X and W drive. But again, that's going to bring in a lot more features for working collaboratively and being able to access those documents, not having to rely on a file server here on site. We can trust that those are hosted in Microsoft's cloud and be able to get to them that way. And the last one here, so those other ones are big projects. This is going to be the biggest one. So our hyperconverged server that I mentioned earlier is due for replacement next year. That's going to be a large cost. We're looking at what our options are and how we want to, what we want to go with after that. Do we want to look at something similar? Do we want to look at something completely different? Do we want to look at kind of a hybrid between physical servers and virtual servers? So far, we've been very happy with how the hyperconverged has worked, with having that failover on the different hosts or the physical servers. But with that comes a large price tag. So as I mentioned, that system is about $300,000 to $400,000. So we're trying to see what we can do if that price can come down at all. If we need 4 hosts or if we can get by with maybe 3. But that's going to be our big project for next year. So that'll be a large cost that'll come down at some point.
Commissioner McCollum.
Yeah, I know you said how long they last. How
Yep.
long will the new one last?
It's 5 to 7 years,
Yeah.
depending on the workload and the licensing. Because that's the other side of it too, is those servers, the licensing on those servers will be just like Windows 10 goes end of life. The 2016 server license on those will go end of life in end of 2026, I believe, or early 2027. So we want to be proactive there and make sure we're not pushing that to the last moment. And then into the future. So once we have everything into OneDrive and onto SharePoint, we want to look to an automated workflow system. So this would be something that all of our departments can use, very similar to our help desk ticketing system. It would be something that finance can use, something that HR can use when there's requests to change things, something our shop can use with their vehicle tickets out there. The shop's still using a paper ticket when there's an issue with a vehicle, drivers are filling out a paper ticket and putting it in a bin. We'd like to get that automated. So we'd like to look to a system that can encompass all of this and have different groups in that system that we can send those tickets to whichever group needs to be. If there's a change for finance or like a purchase order request, someone can go into the system, hit new purchase order request, have it go right to finance. They'll be alerted by email, and everything's held in an electronic form. And then we still want to look to some kind of self-service password reset. So this has been on my report, I think the last 2 years. This is one of those things that has to wait for the OneDrive migration to complete as well. So once we can get that finished, we can look to some kind of self-service. What that means is if you're locked out of your account, maybe it's a Saturday after hours, you will have personal questions that you've set up in advance that only you would know. In theory, you can answer those questions and regain access to your account without having to call us to say, hey, can you unlock my account? We've had instances where some of our mechanics may come in during a snow emergency and they may have accidentally locked their account or changed their password and it didn't sync correctly or something like that. And they've needed to call us to get them back in. So I felt really badly last year. I was actually in the grocery store buying my last minute supplies before a snowstorm. And one of the mechanics called me and said he couldn't get in. So I rushed home and got him in. So this will be a good tool for staff to use in that instance. So they're able to help themselves verify their identity and get back into their account. But so we'll look into that once the OneDrive is completed. And then the last thing we want to do, so every year, along with the finance audit, we are audited by Plant Moran. This was something that was on our radar and also recommended by them, is to have another third-party MSP or a company that specializes in trying to hack your network to find where your weaknesses are. So we don't want to have our MSP do it and Applied Innovation. We don't want to have them do it because they already have a vast knowledge of our system. But we don't want to have one of us do it. We want to have someone that has completely no knowledge try to break into the network or into the building or whatever it may be. Tell us how they did it. What are we missing? Just kind of that extra review. Where can we improve? Things like that. That is all I have. I thought about doing a tour with you like Adam did. I was going to try to one up him on his tour, but I know you have a busy day today. So I will just say that I'm happy to show you the server rooms, any of the configuration. I'm happy to show you the camera system if you'd like to see that. Maybe after the board meeting, if you'd like to come up, I'm happy to show you.
Okay.
Couple questions.
Commissioner Smers?
I know servers they make one up graders. I don't know, but it's kind of hard to, one up the grader, for large equipment.
I don't know.
With some wires and boxes.
Some pretty cool lights in there, let me tell you.
Commissioner McCollum?
Yes, Chris, for the third-party security audit.
Yes.
That it will be a cost to that, correct?
There will be a cost to that. We'll look to see if we can get that either through our cybersecurity insurance.
Okay,
There's a couple different options we may be able to get, either no cost or a low cost. So we've yet to determine what route we want to go for that, but I imagine there will be some kind of a cost to that.
thank you.
Other questions? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Josh. Thank you, Dan.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
All right, we are scheduled to take a 10-minute break. So if we can please come back in here and be ready to roll at 10:45. Whenever you're ready, Managing Director Siddle.
All right. Ready whenever you.
I have a question. I
Uh,
just said something.
Commissioner McCollum
Was
has a
that
question.
on there, on the recording?
Is what?
Was it recording when I was talking?
You'll have to check with you'll have to check with Houston.
So it's good? Okay, I'm not on there?
We can double check.
Well, now
that.
all that.
Okay,
is-
then you'll clean it up. Thank you.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your attention this morning. We're going to be talking about the county road and non-motorized millage, what we would like to have become the efforts to renew and restore. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. Many of you have actually seen parts of it. Part of it I am actually going through again. I'll go through quickly, but Commissioner Smers has potentially not seen parts of this as well. In addition to the PowerPoint, I did put before you a draft schedule of how we would like to see this effort move forward. So I'll sort of go back to, but certainly at any point, if you have questions, stop me as we're going through. So a quick agenda, we'll talk about how what we've done in the past, what we're currently doing, what we're hoping to do in the future, and answer any additional questions that you have. So real quick, how did we get to where we're at today? So our story started way back at about 2014. At that point in time, we had seen decades of disinvestment, both at the state and federal level. 1997 had been the last time that we had seen a gas tax increase. Dan always likes to ask that question whenever we have a new hire, that we went this many years without any additional funding. We were also coming out of the economic recession that we had, just gone through. So certainly we had seen a significant decrease in our funding at both the state and federal level. That was clearly reflected in the condition of our roadway. When you looked at the primary road system, the paved roads that we had over 200 miles that were rated in poor and failing condition. That's about 40% of our system, which is pretty significant. Needless to say, we are hearing quite a bit from our residents that that was not the expectations with respect to the condition of the roads. And then knowing the priorities in our county, even back in 2014, they were also interested in non-motorized pathways as well. So here's just a pretty typical example of what we were looking at the time. This was Scioto Church Road. And obviously we love to show this because this shows both before and after we were able to do the improvement. So at that time, we not only were we hearing about the condition of the roads, the county board was also hearing about the condition of the roads as well. Road commissions by law do not have taxing authority. So as we are exploring our options, with respect to being able to, secure funding, one of the options that we did have was through Public Act 283, where, the road commission can approve its county or approach its county board and ask for approval of a millage up to 1 mil under 283. And that can be just imposed by the county. So we did that in both 2014 and 2015. In our particular case, each time we put a plan together that reflected 1/2 mil worth of work to be done, on the county road system and then also in the cities and villages. So that was very successful in 2014 and in 2015. In 2016, the county board said they were very pleased with the work that had been done, but that they would be more comfortable if it was, the decision, the millage was approved by the voters. So they wanted it to be on the ballot. In doing that, they also wanted to look at a 4-year millage, which we were very supportive of because that did help us with some longer term planning. Each time, by going year by year, we didn't really know what we would have on the books for the following year. That does also allow us with some of our communities that are, smaller revenue generators, through the millage. It allows us to then, combine multiple years to be able to do a project of significance. So a 4-year millage actually does work very well. We continued with the effort of putting together a plan. So in this case, it was a 4-year plan. The county would, prefer to stay at the 1/2 mil levy, which is what we had been the previous 2 years when it had been imposed. The one big change at that point in time was that the county also wanted to have a non-motorized component. So what was put on the ballot also included the provision that 20% of it would go towards non-motorized projects. So that went on the ballot in 2016 and also in 2020. It was successful in 2016. And in 2020, it was hugely successful. So we had obviously 77% support. We had 140 out of 141 free precincts pass this. We're very proud of that. Clearly a little bit of work to be done down in Augusta Township. We'll see what we can do because we'd love to have that be 141 out of 141 in 2024.
Cheryl, if I could please, just to clarify, the 20% non-motorized comes right off the top of the revenue that's collected
That is
from
correct.
that 0.5 mils, and it goes then to Parks and Recreation.
Right.
Correct?
Yes, the county did decide that they wanted that money to go straight to county parks. And I have a couple of slides here that I'll get to that explains what the priorities and how county parks is handling that funding. Normally I have Coy with me doing this presentation. I figured since this was really focused on with our board, he did offer to come if necessary. He had a competing meeting at the time. I said, I think that we've done this enough that I can speak on his behalf, but if there's any deep questions, I'd be happy to reach out to Coy and we'll get a more significant answer for you.
That's just been a point of inquiry from the more rural
absolutely.
townships. I thought this money was going to fix the roads. What's with the pathways for non-motorized?
Correct.
So
So-
just so people are aware.
Right.
That didn't go down so well out there, but
Yes, so the
Obviously.
county board made that decision that the 20% would go towards the non-motorized. What we have done, and again, I'll get into this a little bit, has been, we have made the commitment to each of our 20 townships that the amount of revenue that is raised in that community goes back into that community. And so while we do understand that some of our townships are not particularly happy with the 20% going to the non-motorized, we make them whole. And we do that through MTF. But we also believe it is important. This is a significant source of funding for us. And so that is a really good investment with the minimal amount of MTF that we put into the millage program. We are really, it's a good return on our investment to do that.
so let me understand. We get 80% of the millage money, but you're saying if a township would have got what they would have gotten at 100%, we make up that gap?
We have made up that gap. That is correct.
Okay.
That
Okay.
is correct.
Okay.
So and I can get into that with this current millage, which is 2021 to 2024.
Okay.
So that currently raises just shy of $9 million annually. Of that $9 million, $4 million of that comes to the road commission. Again, we're doing that on behalf of 20 townships. on the county road system, primary road system. Cities and villages are receiving approximately 3.1 million. That's going back to the cities and villages in the amounts that are raised within the city and village. Again, keeping in mind that 20% is coming off the top. So all of that is really the 80% that's going to the cities and villages, the 80% that's coming to the road commission, and then that 20% is going to county parks, which right now that is about $1.8 million a year.
And we don't have any authority over the funds that go to the cities and villages,
That is
Right.
correct. That is correct.
nor what goes to Parks and Rec.
That is correct. The cities and villages pick their own projects. So, for example, in 2020, when we were putting our plan together on the county road system, the cities and villages were picking their own projects, county parks were picking their own projects. They're setting their own priorities, again, within the parameters that the county board is also looking for a certain amount of non-motorized work to be committed. Even with the road projects, they're still looking for a certain percentage of non-motorized work to be done as part of the road portion of this millage. Things like sidewalks, bike lanes where possible, which is not an issue because we often have paved shoulders and things that we can accomplish that with as well.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCollum.
Yes, Cheryl, for the cities and villages, the 3.1 million, do they use that for the matching funds also?
They have at times, they have done that. Again, we don't set their priorities for them. So if they want to use that as matching for federal or state dollars for something, bigger, they've done that. There's been times when cities have also partnered it with, let's say, water main project or something else, another infrastructure type project, where then they would use the county millage funds for the road portion of it, but they may do additional infrastructure work using other form of funding as well.
But we don't match it. The road commission doesn't match what the cities and villages are doing. They're on their own. They get their dollars, they use it. As opposed to the townships where you've just said, we fill that 20% gap,
Right, and that's
For-
been our decision to
Yeah.
do that, but yes,
but we don't
Okay,
do that for cities
okay.
and villages.
that is correct. Cities and villages make their own decisions with respect to where or how they are doing that. And if they want to match that, that's fine.
Thank you for the clarification.
So this is
If
just,
the 20%, I'm
Commissioner
sorry,
Green,
thank you. The 20% that goes to county parks and recs.
Mhm.
Okay. Do townships then petition of the county parks and recs for part of that money for their own for their own projects that are non-motorized?
they can. There's really two programs, and I'll get to that in just a second, that county parks is funding with the millage dollars. Part of it is the border to border trail, but another part of it is Connecting Communities grant program. And they are using the millage dollars, approximately $600,000 a year, to fund the Connecting Communities. That is a grant program. You do have to apply, the communities do. And when I say communities, it's cities, villages, and townships. So let's say, for example, Superior Township wants to build a non-motorized path. That would be another opportunity for them to actually get millage dollars back, because they'd be getting it back through the Connecting Communities program funded with the non-motorized portion of this millage. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
but it is a competitive grant program. It is scored. The applications are scored.
That is correct.
And then there's always a subjective factor in there too, with respect to what comes before the commission
That is
for
correct.
approval.
That is
And they
correct.
always run out of money, of course.
So this is just an example. This is what we put together for the 21 to 24 millage. And in selecting the projects from the road commission's perspective, we use our asset management principles. So we look at a variety of work that we're doing. Obviously, we cover a lot of ground with respect to seal coat, because preservation of our existing road system is definitely a priority with respect to the road commission. We do mix in some mill and overlay and pulverized projects. We also have soft surface roads that are primary roads where we're doing gravel or limestone resurfacing with that. A little bit of concrete work, a little bit of paving of unpaved roads, and a couple of intersections. And this is where, if you can see over the 4-year period, we're looking at almost $18 million worth of work Now, the previous slide that I showed said we were receiving about $4 million a year. So that's about 16 million that we would be receiving through the millage. And then we would be putting in that additional approximately $2 million, would be supplementing that with MTF. Again, we believe that that's a return on investment for $2 million of MTF to be able to accomplish almost $18 million worth of work. So one of the things that we've asked ourselves is this working? So again, this is using the PAYS. You've heard us talking about the PAYS ratings. These are the PAYS ratings that we have. These are the paved primary road system that we have. So since 2016, as you can see, the number of miles that are in good condition have continued to increase. The number of miles that are in poor condition have decreased. A lot of this is due to the funding and the efforts that have been put in with the millage dollars that we have in place. So yes, we believe that this has been very important in bringing our paved roads into a decent condition. This is where Coy's normally talking about the two different programs that we have. Again, the Border to Border Trail is a huge endeavor for county parks, and they too are using this to leverage other dollars. So while they're receiving a total of just shy of $2 million each year, they are able to put together through this period almost $28 million worth of projects. They are looking at state and federal dollars. They're looking at private donations that they receive as well. In addition, they're funding the Connecting Communities grants. And again, they're using that to leverage that seed money. So not only do they have the $600,000 a year that's coming from the millage, they also have the communities themselves that are obviously putting in significantly more money than that to get to the $3.5 million. So County Parks is doing a lot of really good work with these millage dollars as well. And they too have a set of goals, the border to border being the primary goal with that program here. And you can see that they've made a fair amount of effort with that, and now they're getting to the point where they're filling in gaps. One of the things that we believe has been very successful with the county millage has been the fact that there's a high level of accountability. Not only when we have been on the ballot, have we had a plan in place to show what we plan to do with these dollars. So when we're asking voters to use those funds, we're telling them where they are going to be directed. Each year, we are also reporting back to the county board and to other elected officials to say, yes, indeed, we have committed what we completed what we committed to do. So each year we're doing the annual report. We're also pushing some of that information out through social media, and one of the best ways of communicating are through the millage signs, which you see up in the corner there. And those are on all the road and trail projects that are completed using the millage funds. So what are we looking at in the future? It was a 4-year, what was passed in 2020 is a 4-year millage. It expires in 2024. So we're asking ourselves, well, this is great. Are we done? Unfortunately, as you'll see, the answer there is no. Many of you familiar at the state level, the Governor Whitmer did work to get the bonding program through several years ago, the Rebuilding Michigan bonding program, $3.5 billion that were sold in bonds. All of that money was just put towards the state system. It was not put towards any of the local roads. And when I say local, I'm talking about non-state roads, meaning cities, villages, counties, that we did not receive any of those funds. Each year, the Michigan Transportation Infrastructure Council takes a look at the outstanding infrastructure needs. And in transportation alone, they estimate that to be somewhere between $2 and $4 billion a year. So that's the gap that's out there currently in transportation funding. And while there were initially some discussions about transportation funding being a priority, there does not seem to be any ongoing discussions about any increase in the future for us at the state level. On the statewide level, all both the state and cities, villages, other counties are all doing the same thing that we are, where we're rating our bridges, we're rating Our pavements, and as you can see, really, we're not that far off from everybody else. If anything, we're in slightly better shape because we've had the millage funds available to us. But there's definitely a lot of needs out there statewide when it comes to transportation funding.
Commissioner McCollum has a question.
Yes.
Yes, Cheryl. So no increases to state of Michigan transportation funding. When was the last increase for that?
The legislation was passed in 2015 and it actually took effect in 2017. So we went 20 years without an increase. So it was a big hole that we were digging ourselves out of. We've obviously been doing a lot better with respect to that increase. It was phased in over 6 years. So 2023 is really the first year that we didn't see a part of the phase in for the increase. It is somewhat indexed to inflation or 5%, whichever is less. So as you know, over the most recent years, we had some pretty high rates of inflation. So as much as we are appreciative for the changes that took place, that is not keeping up with what we're seeing today. And we are still working our way out of the hole that we dug before.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that?
Commissioner Green?
Approximately how many counties other than Washtenaw are doing a millage or doing something to supplement what the state and the fed are doing?
Quite a few, but I actually, if you want the actual number, I would have to get that
Well,
for
I'm just
you.
wondering, an approximation,
I would hate to even to put a guess out there. That's a pretty regular question that comes through CRA, and I know that Denise has that information right at her fingertips. I know that there are definitely quite a few counties that do have millages, but each one looks a little bit different with respect to how it's being executed, what the focus has been, whether it's primary roads, local roads, and how they're going about doing it. But I'd be happy to get that information for you. So again, as we're looking to the future, one of the things that we did was we quantified, what are our outstanding needs right now? And again, this is simply on the primary road system, not the local road system. So we have approximately $19 million in paving needs, $15 million in culvert needs, $12 million in bridge needs. So the question, do we need a continuing source of revenue? Yes, unfortunately, we do. And similarly, Parks has done the same thing. They certainly have a goal of by 2030, they would like to complete the border-to-border trail. Again, with a price tag of somewhere between $30 and $50 million. But they view that the millage revenue as being an important source of revenue for them to be able to, again, leverage some of these other funds so they can apply for grants. They can, look for other sources of funding. They also would like to complete the connectivity. They're looking at some of the non-motorized improvements that are being done at the local level and to get those to connect to the border-to-border trail, sort of the backbone of the non-motorized system in Washtenaw County. They'd like to see that by 2035. And again, they're using that Connecting Communities grant program for that as well. So obviously, renew and restoration of the road and non-motorized millage is what we see as the next step to continue the good efforts that we've been able to put forth for the last 10 years. We envision the board, and this is where I've got that schedule in place, that the first step would be for this board to request that the county board put the renew and restoration of the millage on the ballot. We are looking at that as this, we are saying the state and local primary ballot for 2024. Right now it is scheduled for August 6th, but there is a chance that that could be moved up to June 11th. So for purposes of discussion as we're going through this, we are assuming it will be on the ballot on June 11th because that's the worst case scenario for us. If we plan for June, then we should be good to go for August. The last thing we want to do is be planning for August and all of a sudden have it moved up to June. So for the rest of this presentation, we're going to be assuming that it's on the June primary ballot. Again, we'd like to see this as renew and restoration. We've seen a high success rate with respect to renewal as opposed to advocating for a new millage if we change any of the terms of the millage. That's true both here in Washtenaw County, as I showed you some of those numbers before. That's also been true on a statewide level. So Commissioner Green, when you were saying how many other counties have done this, I know we just saw what took place on the August 2023. There were several counties that had their transportation millages up for renewal. They were uniform on passing.
Please.
And the new millages, not nearly so high with respect to the success rate. So we feel it's important to keep this millage. While we think we can make an argument that we would like more, to certainly keep this, would like this to be a renewal, that would be a greater likelihood of success. The 4 years has worked well for us for all the reasons I said earlier. 20% continuing to go to non-motorized, knowing that that remains a priority with respect to our county. And again, we would work to put together a specific project plan, just like we have in years past.
What is the significance of the renew and restore language? Because I know when I was on the subcommittee, that was a topic that got debated.
Thank you for asking that. Yes, the restoration, what that does is it starts off at the 1/2 mil, but then we have Headley in proposal A, which compresses or holds that level down. So basically it chips away each year at the millage. So what starts as a 1/2 mil millage rate then becomes 0.49 and change, and then it comes down to 0.48 and change, and it holds that down. So by asking for restoration, it takes it back up to the full 1/2 mil, which, as you can see, if we go back to the full 1/2 mil, looking at current property values, we would be going from the 8.9 million that we had estimated under the current millage we're in right now. This new millage, we would now be looking at $10.1 million countywide each year being raised through this full 1/2 mil. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Commissioner McCollum.
I was actually thinking the same thing, is that because the one says 8.9 and then this one says 10.1, it has to do with property.
It has to do with that, right, that Headley holding that millage rate down, basically. And then it allows the reset button to be hit. So basically it goes back up to the full 1/2 mil.
Okay.
Commissioner Green.
Then is there any discussion? Because I know there was some, when I served on the subcommittee, is there any discussion about raising it from the 1/2 mil to a mil? Because I think the consensus was that the 1/2 mil is really not doing what we need done.
Yes, there has been some thought to whether or not we should or could increase the 1/2 mil. Is there more work to be done? Yes, absolutely. Could we get more work done faster if we had more than a 1/2 mil? Yes. But we have to look at all the competing interests within the county and all the different millages that are out there. And the fact that there are other competing interests, whether it's public safety, mental health, health and human services, there's a whole variety of asks that are out there that we're competing with. And there is a cap on the millage, well, rate in general, and then also capacity for people as property owners to be able to pay that. And then we have some of our communities that feel that they're struggling with the 1/2 mil. And so to go beyond the 1/2 mil, again, it becomes burdensome to those communities. So the 1/2 mil really seems to be the point where we keep returning to, that we can continue to make good work or do good work, and that it's tolerable for the voters.
And message wise, we can just say, you've been doing this for 8 years.
Correct.
What do you think? Been all right with that? And they're like, oh, yeah, well, okay, that's good. But when you start bumping it up, people are like, ouch.
Right, and then that does put us back into being a new millage as opposed to a renewing and
Yeah.
just doing what we've done before. Which right now, I think we've got a good track record that we can point to, so I think that there's some rationale for doing that as well.
Maintaining the status quo.
Exactly, exactly. So the 10.1 million, the breakdown, obviously, all of us benefit from that. So for the road commission, that ends up being about $4.6 million a year. Cities and villages, 3.5, again, being distributed back to the cities and villages. And then county parks, their share goes up to approximately $2 million. And so what would the goals be from the road commission's perspective? We would continue to focus on the primary road system. Again, that's the backbone of our road system. It still continues to have needs. For the most part, we'll be preserving what we have, a little bit of improvement where we can, but mostly we're just trying to keep those good and fair roads in good and fair condition. We will continue with that commitment to put back into the communities what they are receiving. So again, we would envision that we would have a small amount of MTF that it would take to be able to fulfill that commitment, but we think that that is money well spent to be able to do that. Again, continued, we really like the accountability portion. We're very proud of that with respect to this millage. So we would put that list of projects together and we'd be looking at it from an asset management standpoint. So there will be a lot of seal code in there, just keeping our things in good condition, and then mixing up where we do a little bit of improvement as well. And we continue to focus on both the paved and unpaved roadways.
But these are only primary roads.
Only primary roads, correct. But we do have close to 80 miles of unpaved primary, so.
That's not the question we get.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed. So we would envision, again, assuming that we've got this June primary schedule that we'd be working against, that staff would be working on this project plan this fall. So that would be, approximately October to December timeframe. We would be soliciting township input. That's what we have done in the past. We put that draft plan together. We circulate it out to the townships to say, what do you think? As long as, if they have different priorities than what we would have proposed, as long as it's within the approximately the same dollar amount, and that there's no reason for us to object to the request, we're more than happy to work with the townships to consider their input on that. And cities and villages, as Commissioner Fuller indicated earlier, they do pick their own projects, but we would be reaching out to them to make sure that that is something that they are doing so that, again, we are getting that collective plan together. And then from the county parks standpoint, their priorities would be to continue to fill the gaps on the B2B trail. They also have segments of the B2B that are now 20 plus years old. So they do need to look at doing some rehabilitation efforts on that. In addition, trails are no different than roads.
20 years, I can't believe
it is.
Yeah.
It is, yes. But trails are no different. So they also are looking at preventative maintenance treatments on the trail system as well. Again, they're just trying to keep what's good in good shape and then, repair where they have to. And they obviously still have gaps to fill as well. And then continuing to work with the cities and the townships on the Connecting Community grant program. And then they've been working very closely with the county on their climate action plan. And so what they have been doing has also been very consistent with that plan as well. And one of the things that COI also likes to highlight is the fact that every 5 years they do a recreation master plan and public survey, and that consistently non-motorized trails are a top priority for the residents of Washtenaw County. They obviously reach out to others. They do have other partners, both private and public, that they work with. So they solicit input from them, and they have a very robust public engagement process as well for their projects. So overall, we have found that education is key to a lot of what we do with respect to the millage. The Road Commission and staff cannot advocate for the millage, but we certainly can educate, and we take that very seriously. So that we would propose at starting of the first of the year that we would start those educational efforts. As we mentioned earlier, this is not a new tax. This is just continuing the status quo, what we have been doing. There are advantages to millages. The fact that these are local dollars, these local dollars are invested locally. They do not go up to the state. They do not go up to the feds. That also means that they don't have state and federal strings attached to them. So sometimes that's things like we have to have this really wide shoulder, or there's other requirements that the state or the federal government would require. We can decide for ourselves. If we think that a 2-foot shoulder is sufficient for what we're doing on a county road, then we're going to go ahead and do what we think is appropriate at our level, which is, it's nice to be able to have those decisions be within our control. We can use that money to leverage if we feel that there's some kind of a state or federal project that we do need to supplement. We certainly can do that. And at the end of the day, we're educating the voters that really there's no one else here who's going to solve this problem for us. Again, as we were talking earlier, the state is not going to come knocking on our door with bags of money and just leave them here and say, road commission, do what you want to do to get your road system in good shape. We are the only ones who are going to help ourselves here.
One other positive aspect of this millage that I often say is because it's raised locally, stays locally. It doesn't go through any other funnel where people take bites out of it along the way. The full amount raised here stays here.
That is correct. A lot of this is business as usual. The last go around, we worked very closely. We had local elected official workshops, which actually worked very nicely. We had, I think, 3 of them last time. One at the main yard, one at Southeast Service Center, one up at Northeast Service Center, hoping to find a date and a time that worked for different elected officials. They were very well attended. It was a nice opportunity to meet and to educate. We did talk quite a bit about asset management. Why are we doing the things that we're doing, so that they understood what we were doing and made that very clear to them what we were doing. We also put toolkits together, so we had different information for them, whether they were doing newsletters or we did attend a certain number of township meetings upon request. We did hold public meetings. Actually, we were in the height of the pandemic the last time when we were going through this, so we were actually experimenting with our first Zoom meetings and various things with that. So we did have, and I would imagine we would do virtual public meetings again this time. We did have some media outreach, a lot of social media outreach last time. Again, a lot of that points back to our website, which is we used as sort of the source of a lot of the educational materials that were out there, so that people could read and understand what it is that we were asking, what we were proposing with the new millage. And of course, those signs continue to be one of the best ways of highlighting that people, they can see where that money is going. And some of the lessons learned, again, this isn't the first time that we have done this. This would actually be the 3rd time that we would be going through this effort. But we've learned that we need to start planning early, which is why we're having this conversation today. We really need to educate the public, because we think that this is a very visible ask. They can see, they drive these roads every day. They know what the condition of the roads are. But we want to educate them. Transportation funding is very complicated, and why the millage is so important. We have learned that obviously with the absentee ballot, the ability to vote absentee, that we need to take that into consideration. So if we were looking at the June primary, then absentee ballots are actually mailed out on April 27th. So all of our education efforts need to be done well in advance of that, so that when people are receiving those absentee ballots, they are educated and informed on this millage. And obviously, we would hope that the information provided would assist them in their voting.
Questions, thoughts? Commissioner McCollum.
The sign is very good about project funded by residents of Washtenaw County. I've never really noticed it. And so that's good to know that that's what that sign says, because I'm one of those drivers, oh, it's a sign there, you know. But this is something I like, and it would be good to push this out.
we have found that that has been actually one of the things that we've heard a lot about, of positive feedback from, especially from the county board. They like that sign quite a bit. It's universal. It doesn't matter whether it's a city, a village, the road commission, or county parks that does the project, we all put the same sign up. So it's that same consistent messaging that that's their county the dollars raised
Right.
to that county millage that are paying for those projects.
Good touch. Thank
Mhm.
you.
And one of those little things we hear during this whole thing is, so are you reusing these signs or do you buy new ones every year?
The answer there is we are reusing them. Any other questions?
Just one comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Smers.
I appreciated the education on the 20%. I have been asked about that and was not able to answer it well, so I appreciate the education on that.
Absolutely.
So just to be clear, this board is going to consider taking action on a resolution requesting that this renew and restore of a $500,000 be placed on the ballot either in June or August, whichever. So we'll be formally voting on doing that and sending that request to the Board of Commissioners.
That is correct.
On
We have this set up for October 3rd. It could be October 3rd. It could be October 17th.
and you all know me, I want it on the 3rd, so.
And we have had some conversations with Greg Dill, and Justin Hodge, so they're aware of our intent to do this. So this won't be a complete surprise to them.
Any other questions? This was great. Thank you
That's
for
good.
putting this together and
Thank
putting
you.
it on a timeline. And
Thank you. Absolutely.
the background is really valuable as well.
Good. So
Anything else from anybody? Haven't heard any stomach growling yet. If there's nothing else to come before.
we had one more
Oh,
next
sorry.
up on the
Oh,
agenda.
Tyler Road, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
I was gonna say, I'm not in my seat.
Good morning, Commissioners. Matt McInerney, Director of Operation or Engineering. Take it all.
Adam, we need to talk.
I think that was a intentional slip because we have such a good integration between our departments.
There you go.
And working
There
on the
you go.
Tyler Road solution.
Nice recovery.
Yeah.
Good save, Matt. Good save.
So, just a quick update. We were able to put an estimate together to look at what it would take to repair Tyler Road, near the dam. Currently it's closed, just as a reminder. We had that, 5 inches of rain, that weather event that occurred, a few weeks ago. We're still, awaiting, utility relocation. The gas company has a gas main that needs to be relocated. And then we were working with a contractor to potentially look at costs for restoring all the damages. Looking at above $300,000, so that's a pretty significant cost for looking at, again, the structure. The dam itself is owned by the Washtenaw County Water Resource Commissioner's office, so they maintain that structure as part of a county drain. Basically above that is our bridge. So the bridge carries the road traffic, but the dam is what provides the support for the bridge. So it's kind of an integrated structure. So the bridge itself is sufficient. It's deficient, I should say. It's deficient structurally. So what does that mean? Ultimately, it's deteriorated to a point where we had to close the outside lanes. So we had to narrow the traffic. So I say that to consider all that as part of an investment for the future. If we ultimately put this $300,000+ into Tyler Road, at some point we'd be having to replace that structure at some point. Right now, we don't have the funding, for the replacement of the bridge. There's also discussion about, the potential of finding funding for removing the dam itself. So there's a lot to be determined in the future. I have reached out to, the Wayne County Airport Authority, who runs Willow Run Airport. Right adjacent to the road closure is a Tyler Road extension, which they maintain access to the airport. So wanted to talk to them about the road closure that exists today and what we're considering as options, for an interim and long-term solution. Also, this week we'll be meeting with Ypsilanti Township. We have our monthly coordination meeting. I've asked Tyler Road to be put on the agenda just to inform them, again, looking at options, give them an update, much like I'm doing with this, with you folks today. And just let them know that no decision has been made, but we're really contemplating, all of our options on the table, including, do nothing, leave it closed. Ultimately, this is one that we're gonna have to take some time to consider our options, but want to seek input from, those particular stakeholders. And then ultimately, I'll bring this back, with what we've heard, and then we've got to make some decisions. I don't think we're gonna be able to do anything probably this construction season. That would be a big task. I'm not sure that that's realistic. So it's going to remain closed for, the short term. Any questions?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCollum.
Yeah, I have a few. So it's owned by the Washtenaw County Water Resource Commission.
the
It's
dam.
owned, they own that. Now.
The dam.
The dam. So we're responsible for the road that goes over it,
The bridge.
the bridge.
So the bridge sits on the dam.
That's
Essentially,
why
they're
the-
integrated.
Okay, so that's why the 300,000 would come from the road commission?
Yeah, because the damage isn't to the dam, it's adjacent to. So the
Right.
road, all the road damage adjacent to the dam, also the slope going down to the water course on the south side of Tyler Road needs to all be restored and repaired with riprap, a very expensive repair. But ultimately, we've also, all that water washed out the under, all the aggregates and sands underneath the pavement. So we feel like there's a lot of voids there. So we've got to do some pavement removal, exploratory excavation, and then backfilling and repaving it all. So it's quite
So-
extensive.
Yeah, so my next question too is, there are some businesses around there. Have they made any comments of it being inconvenience to have that road blocked off?
This is unusual when we close a primary road where we haven't received a lot of feedback whatsoever. And I think that the road network out there is pretty substantial, so the detour is pretty short. And I think obviously they're also understanding given the situation with the large storm event.
But
Okay,
we really have received no calls on it. And that's part of meeting with the township is to see,
Okay.
are they hearing more than what we're hearing? Because normally we get phone calls over things like that and we are really hearing nothing.
yeah.
Have you,
Good.
Joanne?
I haven't called to complain.
No, but has anyone brought it up to
No
you?
one, and we use that road, we
No.
used to use it to get around the airport. But then there's another way you can get around the airport. It's no big deal. I was just wondering, because there's Coletta's out there and American Center for Mobility. And then there's another thing that GM is out there, but I never really see them going that far down.
Yes.
So,
And really what we're trying to balance, we, as we talked about today with the millage presentation and others, there's many needs out there, particularly airport drives in bad shape. We know that's a need, and to spend that much money on a structurally deficient bridge, it doesn't make sense. Are we better off investing into, and there's a picture for you that of the failure. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Wow.
Can't see it on our monitors,
Can you
Tim.
see it over here?
Wow.
So that's the washout.
Thank you.
And that's the pipe in the air below the guardrail that's just suspended in air there as well is the gas line.
So if they close that, if that gets closed, what will they do with that?
We'll still have to repair the slope without a doubt. It's just whether we need to do all the road repairs related to that. So you're still gonna spend a fair amount of money, maybe a third of that cost would be needed to repair the slope. And then the other 2/3 would be more excavation and road bed and pavement.
So do nothing is not really do nothing.
Right.
Do nothing means
Thank you.
don't
Right.
reopen the road, but we would
Right.
have to at least stabilize this
Right.
situation.
And the Wayne County Airport Authority, have they made any feedback, given any feedback about it?
My initial phone call, what they're doing is they're looking at some investment into Willow Run Airport to help spur economic growth for that airport. Hangar 1 is an area of focus. One of the things they made mention on the phone call was, wow, one of the selling features of Hangar 1 is you have multiple points of access. And they were not thrilled to hear that may be an option, that Tyler Road may not be that second point of access to the airport. So more to come with that conversation. But obviously they have really good access from airport, and then airport hooks right into Wired, and Wired goes, you can go
Right.
to US 12 or I-94. And then they also have Willow Run has access in Wayne County on the east side of the airport that they're looking to enhance. They
Oh.
also talked about potentially that we met with them in January of this year to talk about options they're looking at for potentially enhancing and even gaining access to Rawsonville interchange of I-94 for airport access. So lots is on the table for Willow Run, I think. We just need to understand it better and what funding opportunities they may have. And we'll obviously ask if they have any desire to enhance Tyler Road and if they have any funding available as well.
That's
So,
what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, we will definitely explore that.
Because when they have the air show, then I do see the usage. I mean, it doesn't have to be there
Mhm.
in order to get around, but I do see more usage during the air show of that area.
I would agree.
So that's their air shows. They can put in if they want that kind of traffic
Yeah,
flow.
because you have the Yankee Air Museum is out
Yep,
there as well.
yep.
American Center for Mobility,
Mhm.
their access is mainly off of airport. So there are some folks that we need to check in, but we wanted to start with our township and the Wayne County Airport Authority.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Matt, my concern is that the road commission is very careful about spending a lot of money on exploratory and pre-engineering and all of that for someone to say, never mind, we'll just leave it closed or we're going to remove the dam. I understand that's a sequencing issue and water resources, right, will have a lot to say
Yeah,
about
so-
what's going to happen there.
They've done some studies, very preliminary studies, and I've talked with Evan Pratt, our water resource commissioner, and it's a big funding gap. It's like $11 million to potentially remove the dam on Tyler Road and then the Buyer Dam as well. So they're nowhere near having that programmed. So it's right now, it's just understanding what the needs are if they were to do that, and then permitting that could take years, just because it's a very sensitive area, obviously very industrial history. And so when you're looking at all the sediment that is in that area, they've done a lot of sediment clean out, particularly between the Tyler Road Dam and the Buyer. There was a lot of clean out done over the last probably 5 years ago. And so the less concerned there, but also in the Buyer Dam area. That's where the old Willow Run plant was and ACM is currently. So that all will be years in the making. We obviously have to make a decision more immediate. But the road bridge itself being so structurally deficient and having our own issues. And even if we were to make this investment, my sense is that eventually with all our infrastructure, if we don't get funding to replace it, it eventually will end up in a closure regardless.
You get my drift though, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any questions for Matt about this challenge?
Put it. Okay,
Thanks, Matt.
thank you.
Anything else?
Oh, we can adjourn.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Aaron, if you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Joanne McCollum,
Yes.
Commissioner Jeff Smurs.
Yes.
Commissioner Rod Green
Yes.
and Commissioner Burt Fuller.
Yes, we are adjourned.